Wouldn't it be nice to have several thought leaders in your industry know and love your brand? Start a podcast. Invite your industry's thought leaders to be guests on your show and start reaping the benefits of having a network full of industry influencers. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. We are here today with Katie Bullard. She is the CMO of DiscoverOrg. Katie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, James?
I'm fantastic. So we have been chatting back and forth, Katie, for probably the last month or so, and I'm really excited to talk with you today. We're going to be talking about a report that you and your team recently put together that I think is going to be really fascinating for the people that listen to this show. But before we get into that report and talk through kind of what you guys discovered, first explain to our listeners kind of what is DiscoverOrg? What are you guys all about over there?
Sure, absolutely. So DiscoverOrg is the leading sales and marketing intelligence company in the space. And what do I mean by sales and marketing intelligence? Ultimately, as a sales and marketer, our whole goal is to find prospects, companies that are great fits for us, for our product, and then to engage with them at the right time with the right message. And the data that DiscoverOrg provides is the data that allows our customers to do that. So it's everything from company data to contact data to in-depth org charts to really highly actionable information around buying triggers. So things like, is this company interested in purchasing a type of software within the next 6 months? Or are they doing online research related to something that I sell? And we serve that all up in a platform so that every single day you come into work as a sales or marketer, you know who the most likely prospects are to buy from you that day, and more importantly, who at that company to reach out to and how to reach out to them, whether that's their direct dial phone number or their verified email address.
I remember seeing you guys at Rainmaker last year, Katie, and if I remember right, there's something that kind of the thing that differentiated me or differentiated you guys in my mind was you guys have a team of folks that are kind of manually going through this data, right, to verify different components of the data are accurate. Is that right?
Absolutely. So the thing that sets DiscoverOrg apart from, say, other intelligence providers is that every single piece of data that goes into our platform, whether it's hand-gathered by a human or whether it's gathered through web activity, it's all verified by a team of researchers. So we've got 250 people who are actually manually verifying every piece of data that goes into the platform.
Oh, I love that. That's incredible. So Katie, I want to dive into this report that you guys recently put together. Can you first start by just telling our listeners what the report was? What were you guys trying to do with the report?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that we've discovered is that, no pun intended, one of the things that we've discovered is that on average, our customers are growing faster than the national average and then their counterparts. And what we wanted to understand is what is it about fast-growing companies that sets them apart? So if you compare within each industry a fast-growing company versus a slower growth company, what are the sales and marketing tactics that they employ, that they focus on, that are different than their counterparts? And we wanted to expand that beyond just our own customers, but to the market at large.
You guys had 200 respondents that took the survey, is that right?
Exactly. So we opened this up, like I said, to customers and non-customers. We ended up with 200 senior level sales and marketing executives that took this survey, and they were international in nature. So we had, I think, about 85% of them were headquartered in the U.S. and about 15% elsewhere.
Okay. And just looking over, 82% were B2B, is that right?
Right. So the vast majority of them were B2B, but we also saw representation in the B2C industry. And we ran the gamut in terms of the industries. They were concentrated in the technology space, but we also had representatives from manufacturing and consumer goods, et cetera.
Got it. Okay. There were 4 key findings, Katie, and I'd love to dig into each of these 4 key findings that you guys found from surveying these 200 sales and marketing executives. This first one is around high growth companies, quote unquote, doing the hard things. Can you talk to us about what's that mean?
Yeah, so real quick, when we talk about high growth companies, what we're talking about is companies that were growing 40% or more over a 3-year period.
Okay.
And what's great is that sort of corresponds to the Inc. 5000 list. So think about the high growth companies that we talk about as those that would likely appear on an Inc. 5000 list. And what they did was, more often than not, they were doing those things that everybody's talking about and a lot of people haven't figured out how to do well. And so the 3 that I'll mention, the first one was account-based everything. So this is a huge buzzword both in sales and marketing right now. And what we found was that the high-growth companies were 2.5 times more likely to have implemented an account-based marketing strategy. And on the flip side, low-growth companies were more likely to have implemented no account-based strategies at all.
Got it. Okay. So of the 200 respondents, just so I'm understanding this right, all 200 represented companies that were high growth, or you guys were talking to surveying high growth and slow growth?
We were surveying both, because what we were doing was we were looking at the difference. So about 20% of the respondents fell out into the high growth bucket, and the remaining ones fell out into the low growth bucket. So what we're doing is comparing and contrasting those 2 groups.
Okay. And so the folks that are implementing account-based everything are 2.5, so the high growth companies are 2.5 times more likely to have implemented account-based everything compared to the low growth companies.
Exactly. And I say it's hard, here at DiscoverOrg, we're a very fast growing company. We would have fallen into that bucket. Even we find doing account-based everything really difficult. We're in the middle of implementing it and constantly refining it, and it takes a lot of coordination and a lot of alignment and a lot of focus from both the sales and the marketing teams. And I think, the high growth companies are seeing the results, right? There's a lot of stats around the increased ROI that companies get when they do implement account-based marketing, but it's not overnight, and it does take a lot of time.
Yep. No, I love it. So this next piece around doing the hard things, Katie, is around having a successful cold calling program. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, cold calling is one of those things that people either love or they hate, right? And so what we found was that high growth companies were 2 times more likely to say that they had a successful cold calling program, and low growth companies were more likely to say that they had not figured out how to successfully implement cold calling. And what I thought was super interesting was that there were a few high growth companies that said, hey, cold calling is dead, we don't do it. But if you looked even within that high growth bucket, the ones who said we do a successful cold calling, they had an average growth rate of 100% over 3 years. And the high growth companies that said they don't do cold calling only had a 58% growth rate over 3 years. So it was sort of like, even within that high growth bucket, the ones that weren't doing cold calling were missing out on some opportunity.
And this last point to kind of support that, Katie, you have a note here around, the companies that identified weak prospecting skills as an issue on their team. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so we asked all of the companies to identify what skill sets on their sales team were strengths and which ones were weaknesses. And what we found was that the ones that identified that their team was weak from a prospecting perspective had a growth rate that was 50% lower than the median. And I think it just illustrates the fact that prospecting it's not an easy skill. You have to focus on it. You have to train the team on it. But if you do, you're going to see the results.
No, that makes perfect sense. This next piece around doing the hard things, Katie, it's around coaching, which is, related to what we were just talking about. Talk to us about what you found as it relates to coaching.
Yeah, so what we found was that, again, the ones that fell into the high growth bucket spent on average more than 3 hours a week coaching their team. And sort of correlated to that, we also found that the high growth companies were more likely to hire less experienced sales representatives. So essentially what they're doing is they're hiring sales reps who have, less experience, but they're willing to invest in training them. And the low growth companies were more likely to value kind of the more experienced, sort of more disciplined sales reps. And yet there's this direct correlation between, the amount of training that the sales reps are getting and the revenue growth that the companies are seeing.
Okay. So the just to kind of summarize what you just said around kind of this first key finding of high growth companies doing the hard things, you're referencing account-based everything, cold calling, the amount of time that they spend each week coaching, and the experience level of the employees that they're bringing onto the team. Is that right?
That's right.
And so moving on to the second key finding, Katie, you talk about high growth companies leverage sales and marketing technology more effectively. Talk to us about this.
Yeah. So if you think about the marketing technology landscape and the sales technology landscape, they're both sort of growing exponentially every year. I think there's a stat out there that there's 4,500 marketing technologies out there. There's about 450 sales technologies out there. And what we found was that the high growth companies consistently were employing more technologies than their low growth counterparts. It was about 2 times more on the sales side, and it was about 25% more on the marketing side. I think part of that is just sort of the maturation of those two industries. But that was coupled with the fact that the high growth companies were more likely to hire teams that they said had strengths from a tech savvy perspective. So they're not just focused on buying technologies that nobody's using, but they're focused on buying technologies and then training and hiring people who are utilizing and adopting those technologies. And I think, if I think about our customer base, that's the other thing that we saw when we look at our customers that are growing faster, or the fastest growing customers within our customer base, is that they're the ones that are consistently using, utilizing, and adopting the tools that they have.
Well, it makes perfect sense to me. Katie, this third key finding, you said that these high growth companies have a better sales and marketing partnership. What does that look like?
Yeah, so we asked them what percentage of their bookings came from marketing originated programs. And what we found was that at low growth companies, marketing generated only about 23% of the bookings. At higher growth companies, marketing was generating almost 40% of the bookings. Here at DiscoverOrg, marketing actually generates more than 50% of the bookings. But what that illustrates is not that the sales teams are reliant on marketing, but that there's a balance between inbound and outbound. So if you think back to that cold calling finding, what this is really saying is teams that are growing fast have invested in a great inbound channel, but they've also invested in supplementing that inbound channel with really strong outbound techniques.
So far, we've got that they do the hard things. They're doing ABE. They're cold calling. They're coaching effectively. They're hiring less experienced, more tech savvy reps, and then training them. The next key finding was that they are leveraging sales and marketing technology more effectively. A lot of that obviously has to do with the reps that they're bringing on. They're hiring these tech savvy folks that are going to be able to adopt to technology probably easier, and then that there seems to be a better sales and marketing partnership, a balance between bookings generated by sales versus bookings generated by marketing. Talk to us about this final key finding that you guys discovered after putting this report together.
Yeah, so one of the things that we asked everyone was, what did they see as the biggest inhibitor to growing even faster? And we asked that of all companies, whether they were growing faster or not. And what was really interesting was that the high growth companies, so companies that are already growing fast, said their biggest inhibitor to growing even faster was having even better data. And so that, of course, was interesting to us. Data was certainly not the only thing we put on that list, but in particular, it was the marketing leaders that rated the need for better quality data the highest. And in fact, what we found was that when marketing leaders talked about the strengths on their team, the ones that had really great strengths in data quality management had growth rates that were 50% higher, again, than the median. So this is sort of dovetailing where what we're seeing is that marketing teams in particular, right, are inundated with bad data or missing data, And they recognized that if they had great data and if they had all of the data that they need, that they'd be able to identify those opportunities and hand them over to the sales teams that more than they're able to do now. So that was something that was really interesting to us, especially as it related to the marketing side. And I think it makes sense, as a marketer, right? The volume of data that we're dealing with from a marketing side is usually much greater than the volume of data that, say, an individual sales rep or a sales team is working with. And we know that if we could just, say, increase the size of our database by 10% or increase the amount of data that we have on the leads that we already have by 10% or increase the quality of the accuracy of the lead data that we have by 10 or 15%, the ripple effect through the funnel is exponential.
Oh, that's incredible, Katie. And so when you say here that marketing leaders that rated their teams as having a strength in data quality management, does that mean that they're getting data from variety of sources, probably outside of DiscoverOrg? Because I would imagine they're not having to do a lot of cleaning of that data if they're getting the data from you guys, but they have internal resources kind of in the marketing department that are going through and cleaning that data. Is that what data quality management means there?
So I think it's twofold. I think it's that what they're saying is, one, they have a focus on only putting quality data into the system to begin with. And I think it's two, that yes, they have somebody who is then focused on ensuring that data remains clean. Because you and I both know that the minute that data is inputted in the system, it's starting to decay, right? Even if it was 100% accurate when you put it in the system, in 30 days, it's going to be, 15% of the people are going to have left their job. So it's twofold. It's about putting the data in cleanly, and then it's about having a process to maintain that cleanliness.
I love it, Katie. Well, I love what you guys are doing at DiscoverOrg, and how you're coming alongside sales and marketing teams in such an impactful way by being able to provide the clean data that you guys are able to provide. If there's somebody listening to this that maybe they want to connect with you, Katie, and dig further on kind of what you found from the report that you and your team put together, or they want to learn more about DiscoverOrg and see how they can possibly work with you guys to alleviate the pain point of data that's not clean, what's the best way for them to go about doing both of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the first thing is check out our website, which is www.discoverorg.com. We actually have the ability for anybody to download the full report. So if they're interested in the report specifically, they can download the full report right there. And then they're also welcome to contact me directly at katie.bullard@discoverorg.com.
I love it. Katie, this has been fantastic. I think it's going to add a ton of value to everyone listening. So I really appreciate your time today.
Great. Thanks so much, James. Appreciate it.
To ensure that you never miss an episode of the B2B Growth Show, subscribe to the show on iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device.
If you or someone you know would be an incredible guest for the B2B Growth Show, email me at jonathan@sweetfishmedia.com. Let us know. We love connecting with B2B executives, and we love sharing their wisdom and perspective with our audience.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.